Rachel Reeves's inheritance tax raid has ignited outrage across rural Britain, shattering trust and leaving thousands of elderly farmers facing a future they cannot escape. For over 30 years, the advice to farmers was clear: hold onto the farm until death to protect their children's inheritance. But in one swift, unannounced move, Reeves imposed a brutal 20% inheritance tax on estates over £1 million, breaking decades of stability and triggering a crisis that has left farming families terrified. For many, this tax means one thing: selling their land, the very heart of their livelihoods and legacies.
So the nature of my farming clients certainly is that the natural course of events over the last 30 years has been best advice, has been retain the farm until the day you die, which means that we've got a lot of 70, 80 and even 90-year-olds who are still working farmers, who are still going out on the farm tending to the livestock in the morning.
What's the average age of farmers? It's in the mid-60s?
In the mid-60s, I think, somewhere. But usually the farm, even if you've got the next generation involved, then to bring the average down, the person who owns the farm has naturally been at the elder end of the spectrum. So this change coming in now has really hit home to farmers because they're in a situation where there's nothing that they can do about it. They can't give away and survive 7 years. Even if they could give away, it wouldn't be effective. So there are rules called gifts with reservation, and that means that if you give something away but you still continue to enjoy a benefit from it, i.e. you're one of 3 families living on the same farm, it's paying for mum, who's a widow, it's paying for the parents of the children who are coming up, then all 3 of them together, mum can't give away the farm without being taxed as if she still owned it at the date of her death. So she can't plan, which means this charge is going to be a burden. And with agricultural estates getting a rate of return of about 0.5% to 1%, it simply means this is going to be unaffordable. And so farms are going to have to sell land or sell up. And it's going to happen a lot.
Clip plays the warning from Stuart Maggs, a leading tax expert at Howes Percival, is chilling and clear. Speaking to the DEFRA Select Committee, Maggs laid bare the cruel and unavoidable consequences of Reeves's tax raid. The problem, he explained, stems from a decades-long policy that encouraged farmers to hold onto their land until death. This advice became gospel across Britain's rural communities, where land is not just a business asset, but a family's identity, passed down through generations. But now, Reeves has flipped the system on its head. Farmers who have followed this advice find themselves trapped. They can't transfer their land to the next generation because of the 7-year gifting rule, a law that taxes gifted assets unless the giver lives for at least 7 more years. For elderly farmers, many in their 80s and 90s, that's simply not an option. Even worse, the gifts with reservation rule ensures that farmers are stuck no matter what they do. If they gift the farm but continue living on it or earning income from it, which of course they must, then the tax still applies as though they never transferred it. Maggs painted the bleak reality. Farmers now face inheritance tax bills their families cannot afford. The margins on these farms are 0.5%, maybe 1%, he explained. The money isn't there, farms will have to sell land or sell up entirely, and it's going to happen a lot. For thousands of farming families, the implications are devastating. These are not millionaires lounging in luxury estates. These are working farmers, people who rise before dawn, battle the elements, and sacrifice everything to put food on Britain's tables. Their wealth is tied up in their land, and Labour's tax raid treats them like cash cows for a government desperate to plug a £22 billion financial black hole. It's hard to overstate the betrayal. Before the election, Labour explicitly promised not to touch farmers' inheritance tax protections. That promise was central to winning over rural voters who were wary of Labour's intentions. But the moment Rachel Reeves took office, that pledge was thrown out the window, leaving farmers to pick up the pieces. The anger has been swift, fierce, and visible. Over the past week, 2 massive tractor protests have gridlocked central London, with farmers driving their machinery through the capital to send a clear message: this tax is a death sentence for rural Britain. Banners reading "Labour betrayed us" and "Hands off our farms" were held high as farmers rallied together in frustration and fear. One protester, a 78-year-old farmer from Shropshire, summed up the feeling on the ground: "My father worked this land, and his father before him. We've built this farm over generations, and now Labour wants to take it all away. How is that fair? The government, however, refuses to back down. A DEFRA spokesperson defended the move, describing it as a fair and balanced approach. They claim the policy will impact only 500 estates a year and point to a 10-year repayment plan, allowing families to pay off the tax interest-free over a decade. But farmers aren't convinced. How can you pay off a tax when the only way to generate cash is by selling your land? Farms aren't liquid assets, they're businesses. Selling even a portion of the land to pay the tax cripples a family's ability to keep the farm going, creating a downward spiral that ends in bankruptcy or loss of the entire estate. And the consequences don't stop with individual families. Britain's farms are the backbone of rural communities, supporting local jobs, suppliers, and economies. When a farm is sold, it's not just a single family that suffers, it's the entire village. Jobs disappear. Businesses that rely on farmers lose their customers. Schools and shops struggle as families leave, and rural life starts to wither. Reeves's policy threatens to hollow out these communities, leaving behind empty land and broken families. Even more alarming, this inheritance tax raid risks Britain's food security. By forcing farms to sell land, Labour is reducing the country's ability to produce food domestically. More reliance on imports means higher costs for consumers, greater vulnerability to supply chain disruptions, and a weakening of Britain's agricultural independence. Reeves may think this tax is a quick fix for Labour's finances, but the long-term damage could be catastrophic. For elderly farmers, this tax raid feels personal. They are the ones who will bear the brunt of Labour's betrayal. These are people who have worked the land for decades, often in harsh, unforgiving conditions, with little reward. They don't take holidays, they don't have pensions. Their land is their life, and Reeves's decision to target it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of rural Britain and the sacrifices made by those who live there. This scandal is a perfect example of what happens when politicians make decisions without consulting the people they impact. Labour introduced this policy with no warning and zero consultation, leaving farmers scrambling to understand what it means for their futures. There was no time to plan, no opportunity to prepare, just a sudden tax bill that many families will never be able to pay. The fury we're seeing now, on the streets of London, in farming communities across the country, is just the beginning. Farmers are uniting in their fight to have this policy overturned. They're calling on Labour to honour its promises, listen to their concerns, and protect the legacy of rural Britain. But so far, Reeves and her government have shown no signs of backing down, repeating the same hollow lines about fairness, while families face the loss of everything they've worked for. For the thousands of elderly farmers waking up at dawn each day, this tax raid isn't just about money, it's about dignity, heritage, and survival. It's about the promise they made to their children that their hard work would secure a better future. Rachel Reeves has broken that promise, and the consequences will be felt for generations. But farmers are not giving up. The protests are growing, the anger is spreading, and the government is under pressure to reverse this disastrous policy. Reeves may think she can weather this storm, but she has underestimated the resolve of Britain's farming families. They've fought through floods, droughts, and economic hardship. They won't let Labour take their land without a fight. This is far from over. Stay tuned, because the battle for Britain's farms is just beginning.